Want to do something for the real sickos out there? Get into the trenches for this Arizona Cardinals team. Just a couple weeks away from training camp, and who better to do it? I can't think of anybody else. Brandon Thorn at Brandon Thorn NFL on Twitter and X. Of course, you can read his Trench Warfare Substack. Check out a couple of his podcasts. How about Establish the Run? Get the offensive line masterminds and does some work for Bleacher Report. Check out his link tree on his Twitter account. Brandon, thanks for joining us, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to do this. Thanks for asking me to do this. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us. Paris Johnson Jr. I just want your initial thoughts. The 6th overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals tab him out of Ohio State in the 2023 draft. They make the move up into the top 10. He starts and plays every snap of his rookie season at right tackle. What were your kind of thoughts on Paris Johnson just in his first season as a pro?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought it was solid. There was some moments where some of the more savvy kind of pass rushers were able to kind of exploit some maybe technical deficiencies that he has in pass protection, which I think can at least partly be attributed to the fact that he was playing right tackle for the first time and also just being a rookie. That's going to happen against some of the caliber of players that we have in the NFL on the defensive line, which I think is probably the deepest position in football. So aside from some pass protection stuff that I thought gave him issues, namely, like if you want to get real into the weeds here, there's a pass rush move called the cross chop technique, and it's kind of one of the more prevalent moves used in the NFL. It's something that's highly studied for offensive linemen, defensive linemen execute it in a variety of different ways, and that move in particular seemed to give him some trouble. But did some really good things in the run game, I thought, and then I feel like this scheme was one of the more fun schemes to watch in the NFL on both sides of the ball. Just the way that they approached things and deployed their players, I thought was kind of unique and fresh. So I think that helped everybody, including him. But yeah, now with the move to the left side and the position that he played more of coming out, he didn't play right tackle. He played, I believe, right guard, left tackle at Ohio State. So in a sense, it'll be more of his natural home. Although it's not like he played there a whole lot. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys this year that are actually moving back, to sides like this. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not, too out of the ordinary, I guess. But I'm encouraged by his rookie season. I was high on him. He was my top tackle in the draft, and so yeah, I'm a little bit invested in him doing well as well. So.
Is it possible? And I know we saw some encouraging things from him on the right side, especially to end the season. You saw him perform very well in the final 2 games of the season against Philadelphia and then in the finale against Seattle. But is it strange to think that he could perform at a higher level at such a premium position in protecting Kyler Murray's blind side?
I mean, not necessarily. It would probably you probably feel a little bit better if he had more experience at the position because just looking back on my report, I think he just he didn't have a whole lot of starts there. I think just 12 in college, so it's not like this guy played left tackle for a long time, and you have a lot of evidence to go back on. But I mean, not that he's Tristan Wirfs, but I mean, Tristan Wirfs did this last year, and played at an all-pro level. And guys have played positions their rookie year that wasn't their long-term home. Laramie Tunsil played left guard in Miami before moving to left tackle, and just different guys do this, so it's not crazy. Broderick Jones is the other guy who was a rookie with Paris last year, played right tackle. He's playing left tackle for the Steelers, so they're going to be expecting him to do the same thing. So the fact that it's this early in his career, I think is, the best time to do it. You don't want to do it later if he has, multiple years of that ingrained muscle memory and everything and all those habits built into one position, then move them. That could be a little bit more difficult. So the fact that they're doing this early, it's better, I think, now than any other time. So assuming this is going to be his long-term home for the rest of his career, it makes sense. And I don't think it's crazy to expect him to, replicate what he did at right tackle last year and that kind of be his floor. I think that's what they're hoping. And I think that's probably a pretty good bet.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate injury to DJ Humphries at the end of last year expedited this a bit. And, it puts Paris Johnson Jr. In that franchise left tackle spot a little bit earlier than anticipated, but there is a lot of excitement around Paris Johnson Jr. Now, he vacates the right side. They make the signing of Jonah Williams, a former first rounder in his own right. He played right tackle last season for the first time for the Bengals. How do you think he can kind of bookend the Cardinals' offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I like Jonah Williams at right tackle last year. I thought it was a step up from what he did the prior year at left tackle, although the year before that he was pretty good at left tackle. So I think he played more like he did 2 years ago at left, which is encouraging. And I mean, when you look at Jonah Williams in his career, I think you're getting a pretty solid player, like a middle of the pack caliber starter who does everything pretty well, nothing great necessarily. He's going to be overmatched against elite level competition. But he's a guy you could certainly win with. He's functional and probably more of kind of a short term answer, I would assume, maybe 2-3 years. But who knows? He's not that old. Potentially this could be a long term answer. So especially if he could settle in and get more comfortable at that position in year two. So I like the signing and I like the
Yeah.
pairing overall. And I kind of like the direction that they went there, especially for the contract and whatnot as well.
Yeah, and it seems like even with the move for Paris Johnson Jr. going from right to left, there's some good continuity there. Can you speak to I guess, uh, how you can go from such a tight knit group where Yelda Froholt emerges in his first real crack at starting at center? Will Hernandez really held down the right guard position and will continue going forward. It feels like Evan Brown's probably destined to be their starting left guard coming over from Seattle and some time in Detroit. But, when you look at this group, you've got three returning starters for the most part. Like, how important is that to have as far as cohesion for the offensive line?
I think it is important. I will say playing the same position, definitely elevates that continuity. So Paris moving,
Mm.
yeah, maybe like two and a half starters in a way,
Mm.
in some sense. But having the center right guard at least build upon that chemistry is nice. New right tackle, new left guard. So it's, I would say adequate continuity. It's enough. It helps having continuity with the scheme. I think that's a piece of it as well, and just, at least being able to understand the terminology and things like that and not have to start from day one in that aspect. So mentally, just generally, at least those guys that are returning could be on the same page, including backups there as well. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think this is, probably more of like a below average offensive line, honestly.
Mm.
With the chance to be, more middle of the pack, top 15, 16, I think that's, feasible. I loved what Froholt did at center last year. I thought he was one of the best run blocking centers in the league, especially. He's one of the strongest centers in the league, which is cool. He's probably one of
Yeah.
the 5 or 6, just pure, brute strength, play strength. So you could do a lot with that, I think, and I think that that's beneficial. And then Hernandez is also just one of those guys who has a lot of raw power and strength. So that's kind of a cool pairing there. You could do some things with that, even though there are some deficiencies in pass protection and athletic ability and movement skills. Just the fact that they kind of have those trump card traits there at center
Yeah.
and right guard is cool. And that's kind of a nice mixture with what Paris and Jonah offer you. I think left guard, I mean, to me, I think Isaiah Adams is the guy there that, if he doesn't win the job right away, he gives you the most upside at least. I don't
Hmm.
see Evan Brown being, a very good starter at left guard. I see him more of kind of a center only guy. I know he's been a key kind of swing backup in his career, but that's a guy you probably ideally want to be a swing backup. But because he's a veteran, I think maybe, yeah, it would make some sense if he wins the job from day one. But Isaiah Adams is the more talented guy there. So I'm very interested to see, when he could crack the lineup if he does this year.
Really interesting player out of Illinois there as a third round pick, and Isaiah Adams, absolutely big, strong kid, in
Yep.
a program that really liked to run the football. The previous season before he kind of was forced over into left tackle spot where he probably profiles more as an inside guy. Can this offensive line, and the last question about the O line before we switch over to the D line, but can this offensive line elevate itself potentially just where it can excel in the run game? Because you said where it kind of falls behind in pass pro. If them and James Conner can really kind of continue to establish the run like they did in 2023, could they kind of make up for some deficiencies that they have in the pass pro?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I would say most offensive lines are kind of skewed towards this, where they're better run blockers and pass protectors, and that's just kind of a theme with offensive line play because I think pass protection is the most difficult part of playing the position, and it's
Mm.
just more difficult to find those guys. So this is nothing too out of the ordinary here. So I will say that, but I do think that inside this scheme, based on the evidence we have last year and what they were able to do with their run game in particular, and sort of some of the creative wrinkles that they were adding, and some of the eye candy that they were utilizing, and now to have Kyler Murray back full time and to give you that element, kind of an extra threat in the run game for defenders to have to account for over a full season, hopefully. I feel like they're in a good ecosystem here to make this work and to be kind of a, you know, the whole greater than the sum of the parts type of offensive line. I could definitely see that happening this year in Arizona.
Yeah, that's well said. And then I always flip to the defensive side where,
Yeah.
last year it was tough. It was one of the, I guess, weaker position groups that I think we've seen in a long time at any position group for that matter. But the interior of the defensive line, you could tell that there was an emphasis to upgrade that, at least raise the floor level. They go
Yep.
out and they give a big contract to Justin Jones. They give a fairly big contract to Bilal Nichols to come over from Vegas to the Cardinals. And then they draft Darius Robinson. They are joined by, a guy who emerged, I think, as a 6th-round pick, as maybe a rotational piece in Dante Stills. What's your overall kind of thought on the state of the Cardinals' interior defensive line?
Yeah. So it's, I think you probably said it best there and just encapsulated it is just raising the floor, more than anything. This isn't like, Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols are ideally probably like your third defensive tackles. But if you have both of them together, that's comparatively to what they had last year, it's going to be better. And these guys are, run defenders first and foremost. They're not going to be much, very much of a threat as a pass rusher. But that's fine. Guys to hold the point of attack, free up linebackers, probably be pretty good on stunts, just they're nice complementary sort of pieces. So that's how I kind of see them, and that interior defensive line in terms of the starting, projected starting lineup. And then Darius Robinson is obviously, I think, the guy here that I've seen, based on the film that I've seen, is definitely the highest upside guy here, who has inside out versatility. But I do think, on passing downs in particular, interior wise would probably be where he's going to be the biggest threat,
Yeah.
with what he could do as a rusher. And then maybe on base downs outside, I don't know, but we'll see how that goes. That's just kind of his body type and his play style, I think. But yeah, I mean, this is a big kid with long arms, strong upper body, explosive, kind of fast twitch guy. Got to see him up and close, at the Senior Bowl, and he was one of the 2 or 3 best interior, or not interior, but just trench players there, I would say.
Hmm.
Him and Jackson Powers Johnson really stood out to me. But yeah, I mean, just seeing him on film, I didn't study and write up defensive line like I do offensive line for Bleacher Report. But I definitely saw a lot of Darius Robinson just watching offensive linemen and him give a lot of guys problems. So that's a nice piece to have, a nice inside out piece who has upside here still, I think, to develop.
Do you think there's maybe unfair pressure for him to have to be the guy in year one and try to elevate that group, or is that something that you think that he can handle?
I think it's probably a good situation for him because he has those veterans to lean on,
Hmm.
and even though these guys aren't necessarily the best pass rushers, these are guys who have played a lot of football, who are probably good presences in the defensive line room to have for him to lean on and kind of, grow under. So I think this is probably a good situation for him. It puts him in a position where, yeah, they're counting on him to probably generate pressure more so than any of these other guys, I would say. But he has, I'd say, a good presence around him in terms of the veterans to lean on to do that, and to spell him and things like that. He's not necessarily going to have to be a full-time guy because of those
Yeah.
guys. So I think it's a pretty good situation for him. It's, definitely could be worse, that's for sure.
Some new names obviously on the line, and this is the last question I have. But when you look at the entirety of the front seven, the defensive front seven, kind of running it back outside of Xavier Thomas coming over from Clemson as a 5th-round pick, it's kind of the status quo at the outside linebacker position, the pass rush. where it feels like there's going to be a ton of pressure on a second-round pick going into his second season, B.J. Ojulari, and a player playing the position for a second year in Zaven Collins. Are you concerned like where the pass rush is going to come with this group?
Um, to a certain extent, but I think when you look at the sort of scheme that they're utilizing and how they're able to creatively generate pressure through scheme,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's simulated pressures, basically fooling offensive linemen into not knowing who's coming and coming from where, and just being very multiple. I think that can elevate the personnel here, because I would agree that the personnel is obviously very unproven. There's not like a bona fide starter here. I mean, there's some nice players here and some nice ideas here, but there's no like proof here yet. So I think again, the coolest thing about the Cardinals is sort of this ecosystem that the coaching staff is putting together based on last year and the scheme that they're operating in on both sides of the ball, that is going to be able to probably make this personnel look a little bit better than it is, and also give them room to develop if they are going to do that. And I think a guy like BJ Ojulari probably is the highest upside guy here, just based on some of his flashes, which is kind of all it's been going back to LSU. But now, granted, his flashes are really nice, and there's something there. So he would be the guy I would say that I would, probably expect to have the best year here if I was betting on it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think just collectively as a pass rush unit, with all these sorts of different body types and skill sets that they have, I have a pretty decent amount of faith that this coaching staff is going to be able to get the most out of it, at least. So, they have that working for them, I think, in their favor.
I think that's encouraging for our listeners out there, those Cardinals fans concerned. I mean, down the stretch of the season last year might be a product of where they didn't have any kind of depth on the defensive line after so many injuries, that pass rush could only muster like one sack over the last 6 games. But, we'll see. I mean, there's an expectation of a big jump from Ojulari, Zaven Collins, consistency from Dennis Gardeck. You can't find better insight as far as the trenches go than our guy, Brandon Thorn. Make sure that you're subscribed to the Trench Warfare Substack, and of course, checking out him on Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL. Thank you so much for your insight, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.